Welcome to Unit 13 of our medical terminology course. For this unit, we're going to be talking about the nervous system and all of the words associated with the nervous system. Do make sure that you pull your word lists that are provided or follow the links below to our sites where you can find them so that you can follow along and get the most out of this unit. Okay, we're going to be looking at the basic anatomy of the nervous system. So we're first going to look at neurons. We're going to look at some of the divisions of the nervous system. We're going to look at the brain components or the basic components for this particular unit, the spinal cord. We're definitely going to focus on some new words and some word parts related to the nervous system. We're going to look at common diseases and how they apply to medical terminology in your future career. And then we're going to take a look at some of the common abbreviations used in the nervous system. So let's get started. All right, so first we're going to look at the basic unit of the nervous system, and the basic unit of the nervous system is called the neuron. So this is a graphical representation of a neuron. It is microscopic, and you have billions of them in your body. So obviously this one is blown up so we can take a look at some of the different pieces. All right, so off of this little center or this circular portion, which we'll name up in just a moment, we have all of these little branched pieces that you kind of see. I always think of them as kind of tree branches coming off. These are referred to as the dendrites, and there are often many, right? So if you're looking at an actual neuron, you're going to see what looks like this very vast network of these shortened tree-like branches coming off of this central portion. The word dendrite or dendro, if you look at your word list, means a thin fiber extending, and that's exactly what it looks like, right? So these little fibers that kind of branch off of the main portion. Next up, we have this center portion of this nice little circle in the center, and this is referred to as the soma, which means a body. So if you look at the term soma on your word list, it does refer to a body. So it just depends on what text you're looking at, but that little center, more oval section is the soma or the body component of the neuron. In the center of that body or that soma, we've got that nice little light purple circle. That is a nucleus. That nucleus is just like the nucleus of any other cell. This one just happens to control this neuron. And if you recall from our previous cell chapter, the root term for nucleus was nucleo, so just what it sounds like. Okay, next up, we have this long tail portion, and I've removed those little yellow overlays for a second. We're going to talk about those in a minute. But one of the extensions off of that body or that soma is going to be extremely long. We often refer to it as being almost tail-like. And so that one that is extremely long is referred to as the axon. The end of that axon has some very small branches. It kind of reminds me of those dendrites, but it's coming off of that long tail. And so we refer to all of those little branches at the end of this long tail or that axon as the axon terminal. And if you look at your word list, terminal or the word terminal refers to being an end or a boundary. So this is really the end portion of the axon. Okay, so we're going to go back and put on those little cells over the top that are gold with this nice little brown nuclei in the center. And the name of those cells are called the Schwann cells. So each of those little components that wrap around the axon from top to bottom is an individual Schwann cell. Because these are individual cells that wrap from the start of the axon by the soma or by the body and go all the way down towards that axon terminal, there are some gaps in between each of those cells. I've sort of exaggerated them here just so you can really sort of see the difference where the axon is still visible in between each of those cells. But we do give a term to that little component. So that gap between each of the Schwann cells is called the node of Ranvier, which is named for the scientist who discovered them. Next up, we often refer to the Schwann cells that wrap from the start of that axon to that axon terminal as myelin. So if you see that term myelin, we're really talking about all of the Schwann cells wrapping the axon from start to finish, right? The individual cells themselves are referred to as a Schwann cell. Their components as they wrap around from top to bottom around the axon is referred to as myelin. Myelo, if you look at your word list, refers to the spinal cord. And that's really just because the neurons are what make up your spinal cord and your brain in different portions. All right, here is a nice image of the axon in cross section. And so you can see that nice little purple center. We've basically cut through an axon where a Schwann cell is. And what happens is the Schwann cell literally wraps itself around the axon in an act to protect itself. Okay, if we damage the axon itself, and there is some conflicting science on this, but for the most part, the axon itself cannot fully repair itself. It's one of the few cells in the body where it doesn't repair. So think about spinal cord injuries, right? Generally, once we sort of cut through a significant portion of those, we're not going to gain those back and they're not going to heal. So those Schwann cells that make up this myelin come in and they literally wrap almost in a spiral or circular motion around the axon in order to protect it. And we refer to that as the myelin.